Greetings, Craddock here. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Inna's Water Ally Nephalem rifting build. Super quick clears with this build. A very fun one indeed to also play for Nephalem rifts. So yeah, it's a pet build, which makes it very efficient in terms of picking up items, clearing the rift, that sort of thing. Now, before we get going, I wanted to feature the Maxroll.gg variant because it does a great job at detailing all the basic mechanics and detailed mechanics anyway through the written guide here by Northwar. Thank you very much, by the way. Links will be in the description for this one. I also wanted to kind of reference this because I'm going to be comparing my build to this build rather than go through all the nitty-gritty of every single piece or item or skill. It will be much more interesting to my viewers, I think, than that I could just compare my choices, which are different from this version here, and justifications for those. So anyways, just keep that in mind, and yeah, let's get going. So one of the first things I noticed with the Maxroll build is that it was tailored to higher paragons, because while I was clearing very fast at lower paragons, I wasn't necessarily decimating the rifts. So I really liked swapping in the Aughilds set, the bracer, and the shoulder piece. Shoulder piece is really open with this particular variation, so making use of that slot is kind of nice. It's actually kind of nice. It's very efficient. For DPS, you get extra multiplier. Elite damage is going to be very important at these lower paragons as well. Just helps you decimate, since the build is so elite focused. Killing those elite packs so much faster is going to just increase the clear speed of the build at these lower paragons. And then also, if your gold wrap does drop, having that elite damage reduction is quite nice, right, for toughness. Now, after I had made this change with the Aughilds, I noticed I was running into another problem. The Maxroll build actually features a skill called Way of the 100 Fists, Blazing Fists. And Blazing Fists is really a good choice because it gives you 15% movement speed, and it can also give you attack speed when you critically hit, right? So this would be nice, as you know, attack speed gives you extra damage through the pets, and the mobility is always nice and welcome, but one of the problems with this build as you start to destroy enemies is you're moving so quickly through the rift. Your leashing radius on the Mystic Allies is now very small. Say you dash on top of an elite pack, the Water Allies will start on your character DPSing. And oftentimes you dash to a location and then you try to punch with the Way of the 100 Fists, and what happens is by the time the animation comes through, it doesn't hit anything because the monsters that are right on top of you have been killed, right? So this is an issue with proccing the restraint side of your Bastions of Will set bonus because you're putting effort there that oftentimes isn't realized, and the skill itself is just dead weight at that point. So one of the issues with this skill is that the first attack is much longer than some of the other generators that you can choose. So I've chosen to go with Deadly Reach, specifically because it has a much shorter initial hit. So if all you get is that initial hit, you're more likely first off to hit the enemy before it's killed. You know, if you're saving 1 to 2 frames, maybe 3 frames even, for that first attack. Secondly, we're gonna run the rune Scattered Blows on Deadly Reach. Basically what this does is when your third hit comes through, it will shock enemies, fist enemies within a 25-yard radius, meaning that if the enemy that is right on top of you has been killed, but the enemies to your, within your 25 AoE radius are still alive, they will get hit by this third hit proc. And guess what? That also activates the second half of your focus and restraint bonus, which is highly advantageous for uptime on this multiplier. It actually means you speed through the rift so much faster, and you're able to both use your Cyclone Strike and your generator as you move through the rift. It makes much more sense to me as a skill in this situation. Now, another choice here that is related is going to be the choice of going a passive Alacrity. So we're dropping in this particular build that I am running, at least 2 passives are freed up. I would consider Seize the Initiative for attack speed, Beacon of Utah for cooldown, and Relentless Assault since our allies are freezing. This is a multiplier, by the way, when I would say. But the other 2 passives are fairly open, and I've chosen to go with Alacrity. And the reason we're going with Alacrity here is because this will increase the attack speed of your generator and make it even more likely that you will proc, again, the second half of the Bastions of Will bonus. Now, one thing that is notable, if you do happen and you are worried about going Alacrity, and you get like a Frenzied Shrine and a Speed Shrine, well, what happens at 5 APS? Well, Alacrity still helps you out. It still saves a single frame, and your deadly reach will go from 8, 8, 12 down to 7, 7, 11 frames per attack. So the cadence there is really quick, it's really nice, and really good for keeping up Bastions of Will. This next thing isn't necessarily something that I've changed. It's just something that I didn't know about and is actually very powerful, is running the gain access to all skills for your Enchantress, meaning you get both the second life passive and the extra attack speed and the cooldown and the extra elemental damage, is really powerful with this build because you have the Enforcer gem. Enforcer is treating your follower as a pet, so they actually receive this 90% damage reduction, and they're able to stay alive, especially at like low greater rifts, Nephalem rifting. This will be the way to go. Now, when I was playing the Maxroll version, I had a hard time keeping up my Squirt's Necklace because that build didn't have any extra buffer for shielding of any type. Shielding was not included in the build because they had both the Enforcer and the Trapped equipped, which are large multipliers, but I guess they're banking on either a shielding pylon or just not getting hit by enemies, and that being a thing, which is highly possible. You are speeding through the rift quite often, so Squirt's uptime would be good even without a shield. But I felt it was necessary to add either the Molten Wildebeest Gizzard, or in this case, this particular version here, I'm running the Mantra of Healing. Now, I have a second version that I'm going to feature later that does it differently and actually runs similar to the Maxroll, excepting the generator and some of the passives, right? So, and the gem here is going to be the Molten Wildebeest Gizzard. But for the primary version that I actually enjoyed the most was running the Mantra of Healing for the shielding here. Notably, this skill is boosted by your secondary health globe healing. So wherever you can fit that in, on gear, rings, boots, shoulders, etc. It's nice to have those secondaries for this particular version because it will give you a larger buffer. But the idea here is that you're able to spam the Mantra of Healing quite often. It's making use of your resource, because in the normal version of the build, you wouldn't be spending your spirit at all. But now we're making use of that and actually spending our spirit. The problem is that you'll run into, if you are spamming the skill too quickly, you may end up spending too much spirit. So this improves your Squirt's uptime very much, and I actually enjoyed it. You're able to fully take advantage of the Squirt's Necklace and both of these multipliers, so that's the main advantage here. So notably, this did cost a lot of resource, costs a lot of spirit, so how are we going to compensate for that? I will say Insight is probably the way to go if you want just like a standard build. Out of all the differences that I have chosen to go with, this is probably the wildest one. Insight is probably more standard, so if you're wondering what's better, you might want to try out Insight. But however, I have actually happened upon something that, if nothing else, just looks insanely cool and actually helps you navigate through the rift, is going to be Inner Fire. So you'll notice It engulfs yourself in flames, causing your attacks to assault enemies. When you are casting a signature spell, a generator, this will cause a fireball that pierces enemies to go forward from your current attack. When you are casting spinders, this will cause like phantom spirit epiphany monks to just randomly attack enemies on the screen. And both of these attacks crit. So remember that we have spirit per crit on our Jade Talon. And if you have like 6 or 7 spirit per critical hit, and this ability, granted, while it does not have an internal cooldown, it does have a proc scaler that is reducing the amount of times that you can actually activate this. So it's not going off all the time, but it is going off fairly consistently, and enough that you're getting extra crits on the screen that you can maintain your resource. Maybe not as well as running the Insight rune, but very well indeed. And the secondary reason I like to run Inner Fire is when you're dashing through a rift so quickly, the screen becomes a blur almost. Sometimes you can have issues like figuring out where to navigate is best without looking to the minimap. And Inner Fire actually helps you navigate the rift because it will attack enemies in the direction that you probably need to navigate. So I found it just helped me go through the rift a little bit easier and that sort of thing. Now, notably, you do need to include the maximum spirits in Paragon for this particular version. Highly recommended because you are so volatile on your resource. Another option, if you are having issues with resource, is swap out your 5th passive, which is going to be fleet-footed for extra mobility. You can swap that out for the Chant of Resonance passive. And Chant of Resonance here, you can see, reduces the cost of our mantra activation effects by 50%. So this will, take care of most of the resource problem anyway, and it gives you spirit per second. So you may be wondering, why fleet-footed as a 5th passive? Only 10% movement speed? Is that really worth it? And I would say yes. One of the first things, even before Aughilds, that I preferred to do was shed the potential for these 2 passives, the 4th and 5th passive, of giving 40% additive damage. So you could potentially go Unity as a passive or Momentum. So there's Momentum, there's Unity, and these would give up to 40% additive, but you're already destroying things so quickly in the Rift, it's much more reasonable to swap these out first and then secondarily swap out the Aughilds when you get high enough Paragon, right? So why do we need movement speed in the first place? Well, you need the mobility because while you're dashing through the Rift rather quickly, you still need to pick up items, pick up Death's Breath, click pylons, click on doors. All of these actions require that your character move rather than dash. So we want high mobility, and we're getting that in the form of obviously the Boon of the Hoarder and the Echoing Fury, giving us some nice movement speed up to like 30% there, 25% there. And then the skill that I've chosen here that I actually prefer to run with this particular build on dash is Way of the Fallen Star. Now, Quicksilver is preferred by the more standard build, and the reason is the maximum charges when you have Engiom and you're dashing around, you actually can dash with impunity. However, I found with this build you needed that little bit of consistent mobility to really make it shine, and Way of the Falling Star is really what helps that happen in combination with the fleet-footed, of course. So you're getting 30% that's up all the time. So even if your Engiom drops, this is still active and it's going to help you progress through the Rift a lot better, even on those bad maps. So overall, I found it a better option. So I actually really enjoyed these combination of things, running the Way of the Fallen Star, running a generator that can actually hit enemies and you can actually use in the Rift, really trains you to kind of use the build in the way it was meant to be. Your Epiphany teleports are extremely important for this build. Using your generator to teleport, or using, for the most part, your Cyclone Strike. When you have more issues with resource, you're going to be using these more in balance with the Epiphany teleport. It means that your focus and restraint is more stable, both sides of it, and you're able to traverse the rift and still benefit from the Way of the Fallen Star by playing the build correctly, right? Or more efficiently, in my mind at least, right? Notably, the Quicksilver version is really good because once you have Engiom, at least, it sustains your stack count on your dash quite often, so you're able to just slam down the dash key and go wherever you want, and then because there are no issues with resource, you can just spam Cyclone Strike more often. However, as aforementioned, at lower Paragons, this will not be as efficient because you're not benefiting as much from the Bastions of Will, right? So all fine and well and dandy for starting out when you're initially playing the build, but as you get more and more experienced with it, getting a better feel for all of the utility that you can have with this setup is just going to let you excel so much. So for item affixes, you'll notice that I'm boosting dexterity. It's going to be a focus earlier on. We have dex on the gloves as an affix. We have dex on both of our rings, focus and restraint. Going to be easier to find with just having dexterity on them, being able to roll the other affixes. You'll note that I am running lower cooldown around 61% or so, as compared to the Maxroll.gg, which had, I think, cooldown reduction on both of the rings, which the Messerschmitt does great at reducing, even when your Engiom is down. Close the gap until you can get Engiom procced again and mobility back up and running, right? So I went with cooldown on the gloves, and then attack speed is still going to be hugely important for this particular build. So you have it on the weapon and then the two rings to help make sure that your Cyclone Strikes are very quick, your generators are also quick, and then your dashes are peak tip top, right? On top of the Echoing Fury, right? So this is why these affixes are chosen, at least for the lower Paragon builds. Both lower Paragon builds have the same affixes. And when we get to higher Paragons, one thing I am doing is I am keeping this affix structure. You'll notice I swapped out the dexterity for the average physical damage affixes on rings. And this is, you may be wondering why not crit hit damage. Well, crit hit damage would give more overall damage potential, but A, average damage is easier to find on an ancient ring, and B, it's also going to give a more level set amount of damage that will allow us to swap into, for example, the Warzekian Arm Guards, swap out our main gems earlier as compared to other choices. So that's why I'm choosing these things, so that you can do these other swaps quicker. Notably, we have crit chance on both of the rings. That's going to be preferred, again, because we are running Spirit per critical hit, and this is restoring our resource, right? So crit chance is very important. Now, one thing that I'll just mention, I'm not going to list it on the planner, but if you, for whatever reason, get to like super high Paragon, 2500, 3000 Paragon, and you've already swapped out the Aughilds for the Warzekians, you can actually drop the Band of the Trapped here for a different gem. Band of the Trapped is very hefty multiplier, but if you're decimating the rift anyway, you can go for Wreath of Lightning for extra mobility. It's a proc, so it's not going to be up 100%, but it will synergize very well with the Warzekian Arm Guards in that sense, right? Destroying objects just a little bit more easily, in fact. So very well with that choice. That would be my preferred, but Gogoko's Swiftness does deserve a mention as well, giving you attack speed for a little bit more damage, and then cooldown reduction, helping you out. The dodge really doesn't help for this build all that much, but it's still there nonetheless. So yeah, just very cool swaps to make. If you're like tuning and optimizing and finalizing this build at higher Paragon, just keep those in mind. And that's about it. I hope you really enjoyed this alternate version. At least 4 of the skills that I chose were different. A lot of items were different. Affixes completely warped. So hope it's weird enough for you. Hope it's funky enough. Hold the phone, we're coming in with a crazy build, If anything, I really hope you take in the Aughilds and the Deadly Reach Scattered Blows suggestions, because those, out of everything in this guide, are definitely something to try out if you're running the standard version. Anyways, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this build in season. I certainly am. I've got 300 plus keys already, and I'm plowing forward. So let's go.